The less you know, the better is the best way I can describe OneShot. All of us have heard that sentence at least once before, whether before video games, movies, TV shows, and usually it's associated with once-in-a-lifetime experiences. Some of the games I've played recently fall perfectly in this category, like Omori, Undertale, Slay the Princess, and if you ask my chat what qualifies as a once-in-a-lifetime experience, it's Femboy Aim Trainer! I hate you all! More recently, after having my ass handed to me in most games I love, I decided to dive into more experimental experiences, and that's when a game I've had in mind for a long time popped up again. OneShot turned out to not only be worthy of that title fully, but it also went far and beyond any of my expectations. This game, which originally came out 10 years ago, and then its remake which released 2 years later, has not aged a single bit. The themes, the characters, the mechanics present can not only hold up to modern releases, but it also far surpasses them. It's a game which on paper should be everything I despise. I'm a scummy Souls player, I like feet. Yet, this game ended up becoming one of the most cherished experiences I've ever had. Despite all of its flaws, I found myself captivated by OneShot to such an extent that it might easily be up there as one of the best things I ever got to experience. And everything begins with Nico's orange eyes. The game starts abruptly, as Nico, our main protagonist, wakes up in the most stable Balkan household with no lights, holes in the ground, and locked doors. Nice! This scene more or less is a miniature version of the whole game. It shows you that it's a puzzle game, so instinct-driven Souls fans like me will probably drop it right here, and I would have dropped it as well. But then, it showed me something I've never seen before. After taking the remote and observing it at the window, it will show you a color-coded combination of numbers. This is the PC's password, which you can use to log in. Here I got worried that I had to navigate a virtual machine or some crap. I'm an absolute boomer when it comes to this shit. Only two things I do on my computer is look up Holo Rule 34 and log into my Steam, only to lose in my CS matches. But this is when the game hooked me. The computer seemingly starts talking to you. Not to Nico, not to someone else, but to you, the player. Unlike in most games, where you simply take hold of a character like a parasite, here you're just as much of an active participant in this story as the characters. And this is the first side of that. The computer is surprised as to how you found this, and it tells you that this world was never worth saving. It says that your mission from here on is to save Nico first and foremost, and to hammer this idea in your head, it shows you a Windows prompt, stating that you only have one shot. In hindsight, so much of the story is revealed here. Basically, all of the entity's nature is captured in just a few lines of text. But you know, we have 42 pages before we go over that section. But one thing here is for sure a lie. It says that you only have one shot, and that is just a scam. OneShot is named OneShot because of its original version, which came out in 2014, had that mechanic. If you close the game without the proper checkpoints within the experience, it will just say, you killed Nico, and that's it. But thankfully that mechanic is removed, but now if you log out of the game, you will fail to have this achievement, so play the game properly, fuck. If you're curious about it, that version of the game was just a stripped down version of the Steam release, but there is also one more version, which was released on console. OneShot, the World Machine Edition, is similarly a stripped down version of the game, but in that case, its gameplay mechanics are far less immersive and loses most of its charm. But there is one redeeming quality to that release. Notably, it had bios for every single characters. But honestly, even those were kinda just very obvious, but in some cases they're very interesting, and that interest will arrive in 20 pages. I'm gonna After your interaction with the PC ends, the entire house opens up to you, and you get to progress the game into a living room. This was when I was convinced that this is actually the most Eastern European house ever, because in the fridge there is only alcohol, and there is a CRTV here which is broken. Good memories. To further progress the game, you need to light a stick on fire using the alcohol and the broken TV, after which you light the chimney, which reveals a key to the basement. This key will lead you down to the single most valuable object of this world, around which the entire game revolves. The sun. While your objective is to save Nico, Nico's objective is to save the world. The same world you will enter the moment you two walk through this door. Welcome to OneShot. Welcome to the first area of the game, the Barrens. Most people wish to be isekais in a nice, thriving medieval universe, but totally opposite thing happened to Nico. Isn't that just jolly? You're transported to a dying world. There is no sun, there's black polluted sand, poisonous gas coming out of the ground, and overall everything looks like Asmongold's house. Yippee! This area is perhaps the most interesting and least interesting part of the whole game, at least in comparison to the later levels, but it serves as a good reminder as to why you're here. It paints a good picture of this world's health. The moment you arrive at this world, you're greeted by a prophecy bot, who prophesies about your arrival. Fair enough, that's his name. Prophecy Bot is a nice and friendly robot that lives in the outskirts of the world, waiting for the Messiah. One day the Messiah shows up. That was a very good day for Prophet Bot. When the Messiah was not around, Prophet Bot likes to spend his time standing around waiting for the Messiah to come. Prophet Bot isn't just all depression and cuteness though, because with his help, you come to understand what's actually happening. You, or rather Nico, is a Messiah, tasked with bringing the sun, the light bulb, at the highest peak of this world. The very same peak you two witnessed the moment Nico stepped into this new world. Once Nico places the sun at the summit, not only will he save the world and revive its main power source, it will also send Nico back to his original world, a world which is far more similar to our own. Except, instead of people you have, I don't know, cat people? Nico gets offended when you call him cat, so I don't know. The world is surviving off of embers which remain after the sun's disappearance. In this case, it's phosphor. The most powerful and useful phosphor you'll come across in the game is a yellow phosphor. The sun is made up by the same material, but sadly the most abundant form of phosphor is far more weaker blue phosphor, which is found everywhere across the Barrens. Aside from the world and the overall objectives, here we also find out a few things about ourselves, the player. In this world's context, we are more or less God. Don't let KSI play this game. As for what that means, you'll need to wait a solid 20 minutes. Here Nico finds out that he can communicate to us directly, and oftentimes he asks for help for puzzles, directions, emotional support, and in exchange, we give him intrusive thoughts about breaking the sun. I was glad that the beginning stages of this game wasn't just some random gimmick. You actually not only have stakes in this world, but also are an entirely different existence. You're not removed from it. You and Nico in this game are a duo, as you both work together in order to not get yourselves doxxed whilst streaming. The main way to progress the game is by exploring and interacting with everything. This game does not hold your hands, it simply sprinkles some lines for you, and you gotta go off of that. And honestly, whilst I do like this compliment to my intelligence, the game is severely mistaken to think that I have any intelligence. If it wasn't for one of my viewers, Joe is cool, I would have dropped this game within the first 2 hours. The first of such small details lies at the start of the game. In the docks, you'll find a energyless robot which you will have to power up to row across the next area. For a video, I kinda find describing obvious fetch quests to be a chore. I gotta write all that shit out, so I'll skip forward a little bit until something heavily tied to the lore or interesting pops up, such as books. Some of these phenomenal books is actually my own manga. I have 120 pages of pure content out, baby. Check that shit out. Chapter 3 is coming out very soon as an action-adventure seinen psychological horror manga, and if you like that shit, hop on over. I'll be so happy if you read it. Okay, that devious transition aside, I was actually going to mention the 3 guiding principles of programming AI. First one is subscribe to the Leormada channel. In this world, robots need to follow 3 rules without exception. Number 1, a robot can never contribute in harming of humans through action or inaction. Number 2, a robot must obey people unless it conflicts with the first law. And lastly, a robot must never listen to KSI's music, otherwise it will break all 2 of these laws. For real though, the final law is that a robot must always strive for self-preservation unless it conflicts with the first or second law. At first I thought this was just some background information only relevant to Elon Musk, but I had no idea just how relevant these 3 laws will become for the entire story. To progress the game, you'll need to meet up with a pink-haired robot girl, who I love to call Best Girl. On my stream, I have some people calling me short despite me being 5'11", and coincidentally when I approached her, she calls Nico out for being short, and then calls Nico a cat. With that being said, she is actually very chill, who offers her assistance in whatever way she can, like decimating you at chess, and well, she also gives you a screwdriver, cause fuck it, why not? She is the Barrens' head engineer, a rather morose robot living alone near the mines. It's her duty to oversee operations and maintain of the world's industrial heart, where materials and resources are pulled from the Earth's clutches and rendered into useful goods. At least, that's how things used to be. Since the evacuation, only a few active robots remain under Silver's care, holding out on reserve power and waiting for the Messiah to appear. She is very pessimistic and doubts the sun's capabilities to fix the world. She even goes as far as to encourage Nico to stop pursuing this goal, as the world has already been falling apart for a long time. Wait, we were told that the sun can save the world, but if the sun can't save it, then what's the point of even being here? Perhaps this is just a cynical ramblings of a lonely robot girl, but the world falling apart for a long time does coincide with the situation we see here. It might as well be dead land. Either way though, despite my persuasions, Nico refuses to smash the sun, so we have to progress. Just this side of her home is a mining shaft, and once you try to enter, the seemingly careless, cynical Silver runs up to you, insisting that it goes against her programming if you enter the mines alone. You're too much of a little baby Kitka to leave alone, I guess. Who can really blame her? Nico is adorable, minus those dead yellow eyes. Once you enter the mines, there really isn't much for you. Just a broken camera, which we'll need to disassemble to repair the battery, and a whole bunch of lore. Off to the side, there is a big drop, with only a railway leading off screen. If you interact with it, you will see a faint yellow glow in the distance. Up to this point, yellow glow was associated with the most valuable type of sulfur, or significant in-game items. Every time the color was brought up, not only did it have large significance, but it also had a lot of in-game world-building reasons. People recognize Nico as the Messiah just because of his dead yellow eyes. And of course you have the sun itself, which radiates that same yellow glow. There are 3 items and 3 entities associated with the significance of that color, but it'll be a while before we see them because this script is too fucking long. The robot girl refuses to let you cross this gap as it violates her programming, but her interactions here reveals a lot about the following 20 minutes worth of story. Despite the mines having nothing to offer after humans and tamed robots were evacuated into the refugee area, one robot insisted on coming here regularly. Its reasons are unknown, but this very same robot is Silver's friend, who gifted her a valuable pendulum. Speaking of valuable stuff, why is Nico holding the literal sun with the sleeves of his shirt? How much grip strength does this guy have? Speaking of grip strength though, the next step is for you to rip apart the old camera and shove its lens into a broken battery, and then plop that shit into the electronic radius generating generator, which charges all the robots up, so that's cool. These robots are just here to populate the world. There isn't really much to them, just some goofy interactions here and there as they start tweaking. Another thing that gets activated is the PC, and of course, we can interact with it. Just like last time, it starts speaking to you, the player, directly. The game so far has been more or less you and Nico solving puzzles by gathering materials, but here is when the entire tone of the puzzles changes. The entity recognizes your progress, but states that you cannot proceed any further as the next object can't be acquired by just playing the game. You need to dig into your own PC to find the code for this box, which will allow Nico to proceed. At first I started shitting my pants cause I'm like, please don't make me solve a puzzle by looking through all my holo Rule 34 images, bro. I don't wanna do this shit. Thankfully, the code was easily accessible, as it was just laying there in the Documents tab. In hindsight, of course, it was pretty simple, but at the time I basically summoned the help of my entire chat just to get me through this, specifically Joe. Shout out to Joe is cool, without him I probably would have dropped this game within the first 2 hours. I love how when you unlock the box, Nico asks you how you did that, and then you can respond with, I had some help. Yes, Nico, I had a lot of fucking help. You know what I want to do when I see this? I want to make a segment where I'm like mysterious and performing this, ooh, what can it be? Oh, squares, roar. But then I realize I'm a dyslexic fuck who can't actually act for shit, so I'm not even gonna give you any suspense, nor am I gonna explain to you what this is. So anyway, from the safe, you will find a gas mask which you will use to access the northern half of this area. You need to traverse this area to find specific materials you need to derust the robot here. After a mildly infuriating fetch quest, we get the jizz needed to derust this robot. But then we found out that the robot has dementia, so we gotta go back to Silver. Whilst this is just a stepping stone for the plot progression, I really love this next scene. The game is filled with small moments that really do an incredible job with either developing the world or the characters. I don't know how, but in just a few interactions, it's able to tug your heartstrings and make you attached to any and all characters effortlessly. Despite first observations, Silver really isn't as robotic as she may seem. She has a keepsake from an old friend, which she cherishes deeply and has a hard time letting go of it despite her programming demanding her to do so. She loves playing chess and asks you to play with her. She feels lonely and is cynical about the whole world. She has memories of the past, where everything was brighter and more fun, without all of this corrosion. She had information and understanding of a brighter, lovelier world, which is now, sadly, obsolete. The world is dying. She knows that there isn't anything that could stop it, but despite her cynical nature, she still wishes for you to just sit down and play chess with her. Despite her seeing everything as pointless, she decides to give you her treasured item in order to help you. She wants to help Nico. The world's ending, but it won't make her stop doing things that are meaningful to herself or to others. It kinda makes her more human, makes her feel real. So anyway, after the robot scans the pendulum, you two sail off to Florida. Oh god. Before we touch down on Miami, I kinda forgot to mention some very specific and important gameplay mechanics. After playing for a long time, Nico gets tired and he asks to sleep, which forcibly kicks you out of the game and saves your progress. But once you load the game up again, it will play a sequence depicting Nico's life in his own world. These are just small glimmers we see of Nico's life. A normal life with a proper sun in the sky and a tranquil life. He's playing by himself, but he's having a fun time, basking under the golden sun. A Kitka chilling in the field really shouldn't be that deep, but I don't know, I just got so invested in Nico's story just from these single moments. This is not even 1/5 of the game, yet I'm already very invested in Nico's future. It's just a PNG, but I care so much, but I don't know how. Literally after this section I have a joke about dementia or whatever, but I think I realize why I give a fuck about this. Because Nico's journey kinda reflects university life. Think about it. All of a sudden you're thrust into a alien place, far removed from your parents more often than not. You get to fend for yourself, get a job, and all of a sudden you have so many critical things placed on top of your shoulders. Then you realize that you only have one shot. If you fail at this, you will most likely not have a prosperous future in most cases. So, it's the stakes here. It's the escalation of the situation. From comfort and familiarity and love from this cold, competitive nature of the world. It's daunting. And that is kinda exactly what Nico is going through. He has so many responsibilities placed upon his shoulder. Just a few minutes ago he was chilling in his warm home and eating pancakes. And now he's here, in a dying world, around strangers. Nico is my little Kitka, he deserves the best, okay? I kinda forgot what the secondary of this game was called, so I went on Google to find the actual map of this world, and the first search result was a Reddit post about how someone recreated this world in Hearts of Iron 4, and then in the comments someone said Hearts of Nico 4, which is kinda funny. Welcome to the Glen, my favorite level in the entire game. The Glen is a very interesting part of OneShot. Despite it being the smallest level among the 3 regions, it holds, in my opinion, the most amount of heart. There's just something about these bird-human people things, going about their days, farming, fishing, herding sheep, just trying to live their lives, and then seeing this tranquil world they've carved out for themselves slowly start falling apart due to events they can't even comprehend. It's kinda heartbreaking. It gets even worse once you realize that they were forced to be nomads. They have to relocate several times in order to not get caught up in the hazards of this world, whether that be the sun's absence or something else. As you go through the village, the first person you'll come across will most likely be this girl who's running from Diddy. I can't blame her, but ignore this child in need and go to a slightly older child in need. This is my boy Calamus. I love Calamus. Calamus is central to this area's quest as he's searching for his sister who got lost in the ruins. Since Calamus is best boy, you of course go and try to help him. Most of the rooms inside the ruins are blocked by vines, which is actually the only thing keeping the island from completely collapsing. But regardless, you need these things to move away, and here is where you encounter one of the saddest scenes in the entire game. At the southernmost point of the maze, you will find a dying plant lady, also named Maze. Why is she named Maze? She's alone, cold and on the verge of death, but thanks to Nico's arrival, she is slightly hopeful now that she can at least see the sun before she goes. When Nico talks to her, Maze says that it's already too late for her. She can't be saved. But at least she'll get a bit of comfort knowing that she'll have a son by her side until the end. To me, this is probably one of the saddest parts about the entire game, and mind you, this is just a plant lady that has like 3 lines of dialogue. I don't know why I'm so attached, but just watching her needlessly suffer like this is like watching unjust punishment or something that did nothing wrong suffering for no reason. It's pointless and it's a tragedy. What makes this scene even sadder is that when you come back, she is already gone, leaving behind a singular seed. Thankfully, you can use this in the next level to give her some sort of a reincarnation, but the Maze you knew here, who sacrificed herself for a better future for these people, will never come back, because, well, she's gone. The world's cruelty was too much. At least the bio in the World Mission edition of the game reveals more information about her, specifically her name. Not even her name was mentioned in the actual game, which is Maze is a benevolent and powerful plant spirit, acting as a sort of guardian for the Glen. The last of her kind, her life force has been slowly dwindling in the absence of the sun's light. After all these cold, hungry years, her only wish is to see the sun once more. It's just fucking pixels, relax, breathe. Enough of the plant girl's sadness, now it's time for brain-melting puzzles and autistic girls. Once you make your way through the vine-free ruins, you'll find another PC, which recognizes how electric you are, so it doesn't even attempt to hide the code for the next puzzle. When I first saw this, it was a brain-melting moment. It's such a simple and obvious concept, but in practice, as someone who never really played games like this shit hit like galaxy gas. Thankfully, the puzzle itself wasn't too difficult. You just need to replicate this pattern over some glowing tiles, and then it removes these pulsating cube things, which were blocking Alula's exit. Ooh, it's the spoopy cubes again! Although, it is kinda odd that these are things, which are pivotal to the later stages of the game, can so easily be removed with a mere puzzle. Not to mention how all of this looks. For a world that seems to live and breathe on its own, such a Scooby-Doo segment doesn't quite make sense. At least, not yet! Foreshadowing! For the 10th time. So anyway, the autistic girl is now free. Yippee! Alula is quite the adventurous little kid, to say the least. Despite the world literally breaking down at every single moment, she decides that it was a good idea to explore the ruins and got trapped in this small room for who knows how long. Jesus Christ, how did you survive in this? Despite how oblivious she may seem, Alula is actually pretty smart and perhaps the most emotionally stable among all of the characters you meet in this story. Once Alula spots Nico, she is instantly able to tell that he's the Messiah solely based on the eyes. Once you bring Alula back to Calamus, he reveals that these squares should not be appearing inside the island yet, implying that these things have been appearing and spreading throughout the world for a long time now. Up until this point, the squares have only appeared along the shores and into the ocean, but now, having these things inside the island itself means that they might have to relocate sooner rather than later. Unimaginable destructive force beyond human comprehension aside though, Calamus offers Nico to crash at his place, which of course, you agree to. I don't know what happens if you refuse, cause this is kinda a pivotal point in the game, but I don't have the heart to refuse these Wumpers. I'm a villain, not a monster. Alula and Calamus are orphans. Their mother passed away and father's fate is not known. The only thing Calamus and Alula have is each other. But despite that, despite how cruel this world is, they have not lost any semblance of humanity, or adapted any sense of selfishness, as Calamus gives Nico a treasured family possession, a feather from a prophet, which glows orange like the sun and the ember. Despite this being the only reminder of their father, Calamus believes that the savior should have it. It simply fits more. It was meant to be a family heirloom, but no point in holding onto a thing they can't even use. What makes the situation even sadder is that they can't even get to their mother's grave. It's only accessible via air, and the man operating a flying machine hasn't dropped by in ages. They can't even see their mother's grave, so it hits so much harder when they gift you something precious. It's kinda insane just how much characterization this game captures in a matter of moments. Everything I told you is perfectly and organically transferred to you within a matter of few words, within a matter of few minutes. It's a peak writing. If you can't get enough of these Wumpers from the game itself, the World Mission Edition actually offers a lot in the way of explaining Calamus's life. Although they don't have much in the way of luxuries, Calamus has a small collection of books gifted by an old friend which he likes to study when he gets a chance. Judging by the amount of progress he's made, however, these chances don't come very often. I can't mention who that old friend is, cause that's a massive spoiler, but all you need to know is that he is tied to basically every single aspect of this world. When it comes to world building itself, itself, this is where you kinda figure out a few things, and one of those things is the clover and the sun motif. The clover is present on every single book this same friend made. A lot of these discoveries and information actually come from him. As for the sun motif, the culture revolving around the sun is the strongest in the Glen. Not only do these people have the symbol of the sun etched onto their outfits, but they also celebrate Solstice Day. Solstice meaning the highest and lowest point of the sun. I like how I said that I would only focus on specific and important story-related segments of the game, and here I am overanalyzing a t-shirt in a book. Okay, now it's time for speedrunning, because this video is getting way too fucking long. Sheep quest. You get to brain melt yourself by orienting these sheep when you no longer have the sun. Second, haggle with this motherfucker and obtain ink. Then, smear the priceless feather into the ink and make a quill. And then this allows you to enter the next area by writing your name down onto the robots. What the fuck even is that? And as you enter this pathway, you get assaulted by Mason. What do the squares mean, Mason? So anyway, I welcome you to New York City. I'm not even joking, this place might as well be called New York City because its actual name is The Refuge. You'll find everything New York City has here, such as malfunctioning infrastructure, weird people, goofy ass cults behind alleyways, wild animals littering shit, and overworked employees. Ah yes, the American dream. The Refuge is definitely the most dense and confusing area to traverse. There is just so many roads, characters, interchangeable rooms, storylines, and things to explore that it kind of feels bloated in some ways. It's really hard to traverse, and a lot of its puzzles present are just enjoyable but at the same time very hateable. My favorite part of this level was the maze quest, which I didn't even get to finish because I didn't understand how to do so. We gotta bring this kernel past this robot and plant maize in here. You can get the soil from this guy, but then I just couldn't understand how to get water, so I wasn't able to bring Maze back. My soul is like ripping apart twice, bro. Depression aside though, look! It's a Kitka and a Roomba! This area, just like the Glen, has a ton of character and world development. From the outset, in just this single quarter of the level, you can see how bad the situation is for everyone. The infrastructure is crumbling and it needs a nearly 24/7 service just to provide basic city functions. Outside of that, there are plenty of characters to interact with, and through these discussions, you find out about their lives, occupations, and how they're coping with this dire situation. You can also find my first wife here, who is a nihilistic clock woman who talks about life's destruction and has no will to do anything. You can also let Nico eat pancakes, which taste like squares. Aside from the pancakes though, most importantly, you see people from the Glen coming here to seek refuge from their decaying land. You see scientists experimenting and desperately trying to get more energy, while others are just chilling, I guess. You might be curious though, why does this one look like a normal human, and why does the other one have a full-on fucking clock? I don't know. If that surprises you, there are humans that have plant jars and fishbowl heads. Nothing makes sense. Fret not, cause there is actually one normal human being here, and she actually works at a cafe. This sequence with the cafe owner is probably the saddest part of the whole area. This young lady is trying to run a business here, but due to your average Eastern European infrastructure,
she can't.
But you can still let Nico sit down and eat some pancakes, which is coincidentally his favorite food. But this is where the reality of the situation hits him like a truck. He wants to go back home to his mom, play in the wheat fields again, feel the sun in the sky. He doesn't show it much, but he really is suffering internally. I think the biggest kicker here is how Nico slowly starts to think that maybe all of this is kinda pointless. Nico was told time and time again that the world can't be saved by returning the sun. He questions why he's even here and if he can even do anything to help. Will Nico even be able to go back home after all of this is said and done? The weight of the world, the weight of his loneliness, the weight of this entire situation hits him at a moment that was meant to be his happiest. Nah, we gotta bring this little guy home. Next objective, run back and forth and make a button, so that the nicest, most honest Gen Z worker doesn't get yelled at. After you place the button, the elevator for some reason asks for a code, which it also has never done before, which you can obtain in one of the most unique puzzle sequences I've ever seen in my life. Go down to the girl with the clock face, and here you'll find another PC, which tells you, the player, that you need to expose this sheet to the abyss, which will reveal answers. Once you select it in your inventory, you need to slide it off your visible screen. And with that, it reveals the code. Isn't that just amazing? It's so simple yet so effective. It may not seem super novel to anyone after the, but for me, this was so peak. Anyway, with the elevator ride going down, let's look at the Gen Z boy and the goth girl's bios. A strange woman standing in a clock tower, watching the world end. Seconds, minutes, hours, days, the flow of time inexorably drags us all towards a vast, unknown sea. Will you let it carry you into the darkness, squinting against the sting of its spray? Will you rage against its currents, fighting to make as much headway as you can before you're overtaken? Or will you choose, as a sum, to stare wide-eyed at this swirling torrent and become enraptured by it? Very interesting. It totally doesn't reveal major plot points or have any relevance in the game, but you know, will you marry me? So as for the guy's bio, welcome to the surface. This is my favorite and simultaneously least favorite part of the entire game. This area has so much in it that at the same time it's just so hard to navigate. Honestly, shout out to my boy Joe is Cool for helping me. Thanks to him I found a goat cult, a human heater who takes care of kitkas, and a talking fox who begs you to return if you find the way to do so. I didn't realize what she meant back then, but as of writing this, the sequence foreshadows the biggest turning point in this game's story. But before we dive into that peak fiction, we gotta deal with a very annoying robot. This prick won't let you see George in the library because she isn't picking up the phone, and you'll need a card to enter her room. But to enter her room, George has to make a card for you, but she isn't picking up the phone, so you can't enter her room. Kill me! I don't know how many people will be offended at me saying this, but everything around this point just kind of felt tedious to me. Previously, things were straightforward and made sense for the plot. There was a clear and straightforward reason as to why you need to do specific things. And on top of that, a lot of these puzzles were also interesting and short whilst they were tied to the characters and the story. Here is just kinda, I don't know, forced? Compared to this, the nauseous gases at the Barrens, the plant spirit, and the square puzzle had so much more to it. Everything not only had world building backing it, but it also had foreshadowing, which gives you an idea of what's to come. And best of all, they all were crucial to the second playthrough. This whole task about obtaining fake IDs feels like filler, especially for a contrived reason like this. Only good part about this puzzle is that we get to discover the laboratory on top of Silver's actual human counterpart, who she was probably cloned after. I don't know that, but this is kind of pretty cool world building. But everything aside that is just so annoying. You gotta run around, gather 5 crystals, put these crystals in a photo taking machine in a proper order, and you fake the ID. Okay, cool, I guess. Will the ID mean anything later? No. Great. Nice. Maybe it's just me and I probably would have liked it if it was more condensed, but I did find this area to be probably the most annoying section because I wandered into so many interesting areas that were not relevant right now, so I had to drag myself through stuff that wasn't really that interesting. But after your sanity is brought to its breaking point by running around 9 different pathways, you manage to resist the urge to kick the sun into the fucking goalpost, and you get to meet George. I swear I'm gonna roll this girl's head like I'm playing Monopoly. The annoying side quest aside though, George is a very charming fella, as she somehow makes the phrase self-glazing a cute. The reason why you're here is to translate a book you've had in your inventory for the majority of the run. It's unreadable to you, but for someone as radiant and brilliant as George, it's a no-brainer, especially since it has a black clover on the cover. We already established what the black clover on the cover of these pages means, but the clover, the plant itself within the world, actually symbolizes quite a few things. In the books, it is mentioned that the clover is the most resilient and powerful plant in the entire ecosystem, which can grow and thrive in any single environment, even on top of moss. These books also have it color coordinated with green, yellow, and blue present on it. This foreshadows some future moments in the game, but you don't need to worry about that yet. Trust me, you have bigger fish to fry in a few minutes. As you would imagine, the contents inside this book are pretty important for you to progress the game, but you gotta let George cook and translate the text, so go sleep for a little bit and come back in a second. Once you go through your regular chore of saving the game and letting Nico sleep, the dream you see this time is significantly different. Instead of Nico being happy, enjoying pancakes or pouncing along wheat fields, he is kinda startled and looks horrified as he sees a broken sun. Usually Nico is very happy and excited to discuss his dreams with you, but this time Nico doesn't even recall it. He tries to simply move on and suppress his feelings. As to why Nico sees this dream, well, I have a theory. From my understanding, I think the dream wasn't fully Nico's. I believe the world is affecting him or influencing his mind, putting ideas into his head. And considering how things will look in the next few minutes, it doesn't sound too impossible. The author first and foremost highlights how you can finally read this, implying that he was expecting this outcome or at least had some elements of your journey planned out. He encourages Nico to enter the tower, which houses the spirit of the world. Despite this new term, we're already well exposed to the spirit. It's actually the same entity we've been talking to throughout the computers. The author also states that you need to bring 3 pieces of the previous sun in order to restore it. These 3 pieces being the ember, the feather, and lastly, a small dice George gives you. Huh. I'm curious if she sees this as like a severed head of a... I don't know how to say this without being demonetized. Does she see this as a severed head of a average Roblox player? Or like a object? Because, you know, George has a dice head. The final instruction the book gives you is to follow the patterns to progress through the trials of the tower. As for what that means, you'll understand once we enter the endgame. Welcome to the final stretch of the game. Now the only thing that's left is to ascend the tower and finally save the world. To enter the tower, you have to do one thing you haven't done before. Exit the game directly from the window. This is the only time when you can close the window and not permanently lock yourself out of an achievement and the Sigma male status. This time when you open the game, however, you'll find Nico in a radiant environment, which then proceeds to be darkened as the tower's abyss reveals itself. Nico is alone, and I mean alone. You cannot communicate with him. He calls out to you from the abyss, scared, lonely and cold, but you cannot answer. Nico's panic grows as he starts dancing around this vast abyss, until a PC appears, and this time, it speaks to Nico directly. It tells Nico that you are no longer with him, and that this is indeed the tower. For some reason, the spirit of this world lies to Nico about you. It lies to Nico about your mission being complete, but Nico isn't back home, and neither is the sun placed at its rightful spot. Nothing has been done, yet the spirit says that everything is done. Me and Nico equally just said fuck this shit and started running around for a solid minute, and then we just saw how the PC repeated again and again, and then the true reality of the situation hit us. The entity urges Nico to just sleep on the bed, and once he does, everything will be fine. Everything will be back at its place, and Nico will return home. As Nico rests on the bed, he feels bad that he never gets to say goodbye to you, as the screen fades to black, and the spirit this time confronts you. The spirit insists once more that everything is done, and demands you to never return to this world again. Firstly,
kill yourself.
Secondly, I paid $4 for this shit. You can't tell me what I can do, goofy ass. So of course, after I got kicked out, I immediately tried to reopen the game. And womp womp. Well, I suppose that's one shot. That really is the ending of the game. Nothing works. I try to reopen and it doesn't open, and I'm just stuck at this screen again and again and again. At least that's what I thought, until Glorious Joe saved us all by telling us what to do. It was kind of a simple fix, actually. In order to reopen the game, you just need to open the Clover file from your game files, and that will instantaneously trigger the game to continue. Pretty based and simple. Somehow though, I still felt like a grandma playing this shit. Nico wakes up, but he still believes that you aren't around anymore. But this time, he has a new item in his pocket, a glowing clover, a key item needed to progress the game. When the spirit realizes what's happening, it has a greater crash out than the average Indian scammer when you redeem it. This was meant to be the entity's perfect ending, and now that you refuse to leave things as they were, the spirit will make sure that you never leave again. And with that, you're thrust into the second best section of this entire game. You and Nico are forced to traverse the labyrinth this entity designed for you. This series of puzzles was meant to either stall you or fully make you give up on ever reaching the tower's summit. But now the clover you had in your game files has now turned into a series of notes, which not only reveal where you need to go, but also it gives you a breakdown as to what's actually happening. I genuinely find this to be one of the best sequences in the entire game, cause this is probably one of the best ways to not only deliver a satisfactory exposition, but also satisfactory gameplay loop. This is a very simple concept. The papers are just a cutout and you gotta follow the patterns or follow where the paper is leading, but the execution is flawless. The entire game was leading up to this singular moment, and instead of having a somewhat of a mediocre exposition dump, you're actively getting information while still being in the climactic phase of the game. The hype doesn't get lowered because you're actively participating in the final section of the game, whilst at the same time you're getting answers. The story happens as you take part in the action, and that's what makes it that much more satisfactory. This section is the culmination of the entire game's mechanics, story, gameplay, and build-up. It's fucking cinema. As to what the actual notes say, well, it was worth the 22 pages worth of build-up. The author is more than just someone who wrote a few books and showed bird people how to fly. He is also the creator of this world. He intentionally hid the entity's true nature from you because that info makes you a target of the squares you saw all throughout the game. This info was never meant to exist. It's a glitch, something out of bounds, and as a result, it unwinds the world's very fabric. The author is long gone, but before this happened, he made precautionary steps to preserve the world and fight against the entity's active, self-destructive tendencies. The entity was meant to be a device which would allow the world and its inhabitants to function. It was never meant to be sentient, never meant to be tamed, but somehow it became more than what was intended without the author's knowledge. All the suffering you've seen, all this decay and devastation is the entity's will to end itself and the world. Right now, these puzzles are meant to delay you. The entity can't do anymore because if they tried, it would go against its very code. It can't permit itself to actually stop you, but that won't stop the entity from coercing you into shattering the sun, which would end the world instantly. But here's the catch, the sun is Nico's tie to this world. If it's intact, Nico will remain stuck here. But if you shatter the sun, Nico gets to go back home. You and Nico are put in a difficult situation, as Nico must bear the weight of this world just because the author wasn't able to craft a stable, proper world, and he acknowledges that. The author loves this world. It's basically his memories, his love, his entire being condensed into a shadow of what was meant to be. Despite all of that, however, he understands that this is a mistake that is haunting Nico, so he doesn't place the world's responsibilities on him. He gives you a choice, and the final say is all up to you. At the end of this seemingly endless labyrinth, Nico finally reunites with the sun, and when he does, he calls out to you once again. But this time, you can finally respond, as the sun shines once again. I don't know if this is a coincidence or something, but the moment Nico reunites with the sun, you can communicate with him. All this time he didn't have the sun, and you weren't able to talk to him. You were still able to guide him, but not communicate. Perhaps this sun serves as more than just a tie Nico has to this world. Perhaps it serves as a tie to you, the world, and Nico. But you know, that never gets explained. Nico is back at the starting area. But instead of it looking like your average war-torn Balkan household, it's actually livable. In Undertale, when you look into a mirror, it says, "It's you!" And then it says, after everything you've been through, it's still you. I love that shit. The game acknowledges all the shit you've been through. And I had hope that maybe, just maybe, OneShot would also have this similar mechanic. Unfortunately, it doesn't. The game doesn't acknowledge jack shit, bro. Fuck this game. As you would imagine, the entity is not happy with you. As the author predicted, it's saying completely different things from him. But something's odd. It says that if you want to save the world, shatter the light bulb. And when persuasion doesn't work, it starts to suspect that someone's helping you, and uncovers a Joe from my chat. Of course, we took this threat quite literally and instilled a mass panic in my chat. In reality though, it realizes the author has been helping you, but what it doesn't realize is why you and Nico are going so above and beyond to save the world that is inherently flawed and dying. It insists that the world is not worth saving, and insists that Nico is the only thing that matters, but in the end, it can't go against its programming. The entity comes clean and gives you two options. If you break the light bulb, Nico goes back home. If you place the sun, he will have to bear the sacrifice. As for what that sacrifice fully entails, we do not know, but the final choice is ultimately up to you two. But the entity still convinces you to tell Nico everything, especially when the choice directly stands in front of him. The only thing standing between you two and the final room is one last elevator ride, in which Nico expresses how excited he is to place the sun back, to save the world and go back home. He can't wait, and he is glad you're with him throughout the journey. And then, this is where he realizes that something's wrong. Due to your responses, Nico understands that something is not right. Nico realizes that you are kinda down. It realizes that you're not feeling well, and it asks you, if everything's alright. This was around the point where I, just like probably any other player, kind of felt conflicted. They wanted to save the world, but at the same time we've been following Nico, who wanted to just go back home, eat pancakes and live a happy life. This is all he wanted. And now we have the choice to decide what happens to Nico. And when Nico realizes that something's up, it hits that much deeper. It's such a phenomenal timing of the writing and to have this character acknowledge your feelings. It's so different from everything else. Up to this point, we were just doing puzzles and doing like small interactions with Nico, but this is where you actually have a heart-to-heart conversation with him. This was when Nico felt real. It understood you. It felt your pain, even if it was for a split second. And as a result, you decide to inform Nico. You simply don't have the heart to hide this information from him. Once you reveal the choice to Nico, he can't quite clock it yet. It's such a massive revelation that he can't even comprehend it. This notion shatters everything he's been fighting for, and the true realization of the significance of this choice hits him like a truck the moment you two stand before the altar. I know it's just a video game and whatever, but this choice was by far one of the hardest choices I ever had to make in anything related to my computer. I said at the start of this video that I usually never play games like these. They simply aren't my style, and in most cases, it doesn't matter how combat focused they are. But even among some of my favorite games, the emotional investment I had towards this one cannot be rivaled by anything. These small games make sure that every line and every pathway mean something. Except for the ID thing. This type of charm can only be found with small games. They don't have these insane country GDP rivaling budgets, countless armies worth of people just dedicating their entire lives for decades on making a single experience. No, this one's smaller, simpler, but it has a big heart. Every single line of dialogue contributes to making the world feel real, contributes to making the characters feel real. They don't have that much nuance when it comes to their writing, sure, but every single word they speak to you paints a clear picture of their persona, and every single one of their personalities is unique down to their foundation. OneShot for me is an emotional roller coaster, an investment-filled experience that will go unrivaled for a long time. For me, this game is absolute cinema, and once you and Nico finally have that heart-to-heart conversation, both of you decide to place the sun back. The moment Nico places the sun, its radiance captures the whole world, and life itself breathes a new, fresh air, devoid from past darkness. In these final moments, you get to see every single person you've met on your journey, their hopes risen and bodies lit up by the sun, as the world is saved. Nico's fate is unknown, and the future of this world is unclear, but one thing's for certain, the sun is placed at its rightful spot, and the credits roll, as the last thing you see is Nico's room, but this time, it's illuminated by the warm, glowing sun outside. And with that, OneShot comes to an end. Hey man, look at the bright side. At least, my manga isn't ending anytime soon, right? Please check it out. If you find this ending to be a bit abrupt, that's because it is. If you find this ending to be a bit unsatisfactory, that's because this isn't the ending. And if you never believed that this was the actual ending, well, good, because we have 40 more minutes to go. When I said this game is everything but OneShot, I meant it. It really is a liar. But in this case, I'm kinda glad it lied. Because if this game didn't have this entire second half remaining, no one would have remembered it so fondly 8 years later. What makes this game so memorable, what makes this experience so exceptional, is its Solstice run. The official second run of OneShot, where you'll come to understand this world's true meaning, and tie every loose thread into a satisfactory conclusion. This is where the true meat of this game lies, and I sometimes hated it. And that's where I'm gonna cut the video short. I'm sorry man, I had an entire 40+ minutes just dedicated towards the rest of this game, the Solstice run, but I cannot edit that. I died 5 times editing the first 50 minutes of this. I don't think my heart can take anymore.